The desert had a way of swallowing sound, holding it in an invisible grip until violence shattered the silence. That morning outside Fallujah, the Marines rolled in with engines humming low. The convoy stretched across the dusty road like a metal serpent. The sky hung pale and unforgiving, sun burning into every crease of their uniforms. It had been quiet, too quiet, some thought. The kind of quiet that pressed on the chest and whispered, "Something's coming." Corporal Emily Hayes felt it first, a prickling at the base of her neck. Her rifle rested across her lap as she scanned the barren horizon through the armored window of the Humvee. Her eyes didn't linger long in one place, always moving, always checking. That instinct had saved her more than once. Then it happened. The first crack split the air, high-pitched and unmistakable. A round smacked the side of the lead vehicle, sparks spraying against metal. A second later, the world erupted. Gunfire tore from both sides of the road, echoing like thunder trapped in a canyon. Insurgents had sprung the ambush. Perfectly RPGs streaked across the sand, smoke plumes climbing fast into the sky. Contact left. Contact left. A Marine bellowed. Chaos bloomed instantly. The convoy screeched to a halt, doors flung open, men scrambling for cover as bullets ricocheted off armor. Dust swirled, choking lungs, stinging eyes. The stench of burning fuel mixed with gunpowder. Emily threw herself out of the Humvee, hitting the dirt hard. Her shoulders slammed the ground, pain sparking up her arm. She rolled instinctively, rifle raised, sighting in on the muzzle, flashes in the ruins ahead. She squeezed off 3 rounds short, disciplined bursts. One insurgent dropped, his AK clattering from his grip. The battle swallowed her whole. Marines shouted, grenades thumped, sand kicked into the air with every round. Through the haze, Emily pushed against a crumbling wall, searching for her sector of fire. She crouched low, forcing her breathing steady, finger poised but calm. That's when she felt it heat spreading through her left sleeve, wetness trickling. She glanced down. Blood, dark, heavy, soaking fast. The round had caught her upper arm, tearing muscle cleanly. She flexed her fingers, still responsive. Pain lanced, sharp and biting, but her face never betrayed it. She shifted the rifle back into her grip, ignoring the sting, her mind locking onto one fact. I can still fight. Hayes, you're hit. Someone shouted from the smoke. She didn't answer, not because she couldn't, but because the effort of words felt unnecessary. She was focused on her sector, suppressing an enemy trying to flank. Her rounds were precise, each shot measured, conserving ammunition. A shadow lunged beside her, tall, fast, heavy gear bouncing. A SEAL medic. Stay with me, Marine. He yelled over the firefight, dropping beside her. His gloved hand pressed against her arm, fingers slicking red. He expected a grimace, a cry, something. But she stayed still, breathing controlled, eyes locked down her sight line. I'll manage, she said, barely above a whisper. Her voice didn't shake, didn't waver. The medic blinked. He'd seen Rangers scream for morphine at lesser wounds. He'd seen big men crumble under the shock, faces twisting in panic. But this Marine? She was bleeding hard, yet her pulse seemed calm. Damn it, Hayes, that's not how this works. He tried to tighten the bandage, bullets snapping inches overhead. You're losing blood. She shook her head once. Not now. Cover fire first. The medic's mouth went dry. He'd treated countless soldiers across tours, stitched, patched, and fought to keep men breathing. But never had he seen someone injured this badly, who treated the pain like a distraction, an inconvenience at most. Her breathing fascinated him. It wasn't ragged, wasn't panicked. It was measured. Inhale, hold, exhale. Like she'd trained herself to control it, trained to silence the body's natural alarm bells. He pressed harder, but she didn't even flinch. Her eyes tracked the horizon, waiting for the next movement. Gunfire rattled again. Insurgents surged from behind a rusted truck, trying to close distance. Emily adjusted her aim, squeezed twice. 2 men fell. The third dropped when a Marine to their left joined in. The medic just stared, momentarily forgetting the chaos, lost in disbelief. Most Marines relied on adrenaline to mask pain. But adrenaline eventually betrayed them. Hands shook, vision narrowed, judgment clouded. Emily wasn't riding adrenaline. She was operating like her wound didn't exist at all. What the hell are you? The medic thought. The firefight dragged, though in moments like these, time warped. Minutes felt like hours. When the gunfire finally began to taper, when Marines pushed forward and insurgents fell back, Emily was still there. Still firing. Still silent. When quiet returned, broken only by crackling fires and groans of the injured, the medic turned back to her arm. His gloves were soaked crimson. "You should be screaming," he muttered. She finally met his eyes, expression steady. "Screaming doesn't help." The words landed harder than any round. He swallowed, pulling gauze tighter, fighting the disbelief curling in his chest. Around them, other Marines staggered back, some vomiting from shock, some slumping into the dirt. But Emily stayed upright, rifle across her lap, shoulders square, as though the firefight hadn't taken a piece of her flesh. She didn't boast, didn't grin, didn't claim toughness. She simply existed in the aftermath, as calm as she'd been in the storm. And for the first time in his career, the SEAL medic felt something he rarely admitted: awe. The convoy had barely caught its rhythm when the SEAL medic finally allowed himself to step back and assess the carnage. Around him, Marines were sprawled across the sand, some coughing, some vomiting, some frozen with shock. Smoke still curled from the Humvees, paint scorched and metal twisted from the ambush. The acrid stench of burned rubber and gunpowder clung to everything. Emily Hayes remained crouched behind the partial wall that had been her cover. Blood matted into her sleeve and streaked across her cheek. She didn't move unnecessarily, didn't look at the destruction, didn't let her mind dwell on the pain coursing through her arm. Instead, she scanned every angle, every shadow, every movement in the distance. The medic approached cautiously, hands raised in tentative reassurance. "Corporal Hayes, you're hit bad. You can't keep standing like this." She didn't look at him. Her eyes remained locked on the horizon. "I'm fine." "Cover fire first," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. It was the same refrain as before, but there was an added weight to it now, a command, an assertion of control that made him hesitate. He exhaled, tightening his grip on the tourniquet he had applied moments ago. How is she like this? He thought, scanning the wound. The shrapnel had torn deep into her bicep, leaving ragged muscle exposed. Any other Marine would be writhing in pain, screaming, begging for evacuation. Emily, she just existed in the moment, as if her body belonged to someone else entirely. The firefight wasn't over. Insurgents were regrouping across the barren road, shifting from one pile of rubble to another. Emily adjusted her stance, sliding forward slightly, rifle at the ready. She fired 2 precise bursts, each round striking its target without hesitation. The medic blinked. He'd trained with SEALs, Rangers, and seasoned infantry. He'd seen skill. He'd never seen this. "Where did you—" He began, then stopped. Words seemed unnecessary. She didn't train like ordinary soldiers. Her movements were deliberate, refined, almost surgical. Every twist of her body, every flick of her wrist, every tiny adjustment in her footing suggested she had been prepared for moments like this, for years before ever enlisting. A grenade went off to the right, sending a cloud of sand and dust over the soldiers. Emily dropped lower, covering her face, then immediately reoriented herself, firing as she crawled toward a better vantage point. The medic followed, almost stumbling to keep up. Her agility, even while wounded, was astonishing. He had to remind himself she was injured. Blood dripped from her arm, pooling on the dirt, but her speed, her awareness, remained flawless. The medic finally crouched beside her, gloved hands working to reinforce the tourniquet. "You're losing too much blood," he said. "If we don't get you patched up now, you're not going to—" "I'm fine," she interrupted, voice steady. "You've got 3 sectors left. Watch them." He stared at her in disbelief. 3 sectors left? She's calculating enemy positions, while her arm is practically useless. He'd never seen anyone treat pain with such precision. For most soldiers, the body screams and the mind follows. Emily's body seemed to scream in silence, while her mind executed a plan she hadn't shared with anyone. Minutes dragged. Bullets pocked the ground around them, ricocheting off walls, spraying dust and fragments into the air. Emily shifted again, pushing forward, firing, covering a corner where an insurgent was attempting to flank the convoy. She rolled slightly, ignoring the searing pain in her arm, firing twice more before disappearing behind the wall again. The medic adjusted his grip on the tourniquet, realizing that he was now trying to stabilize someone who seemed determined to stabilize herself. Finally, a lull in the firing. Emily lowered her rifle slightly, shoulders tense but breathing controlled. The medic forced himself to meet her gaze. "This isn't normal," he said softly, almost to himself. "No one survives this and stays." Calm, her eyes flicked toward him briefly. "Pain is a signal, not a command," she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not bravado, not ego, just truth. He swallowed, still trying to wrap his mind around it. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. Emily didn't answer immediately. Her eyes swept the battlefield, still alert, still calculating. "Life," she finally said. "And nothing else matters right now." The medic shook his head. There was no way to argue with that. She wasn't trained only for battle. She was trained for endurance, for resilience beyond normal human limits. And it wasn't some secret SEAL program or ranger course. She had been prepared for pain long before she had ever signed up. A convoy began to regroup. Vehicles that could still move started inching forward. The remaining insurgents pulled back, firing sporadically before disappearing into the ruined buildings. Emily stayed low, continuing to scan the horizon as the medic followed. Every step she took was calculated. Every breath she drew seemed deliberate. Nearby Marines whispered among themselves, glancing at her with awe and a touch of fear. They had seen toughness, seen grit, seen operators endure situations that would crush ordinary soldiers. But Emily Hayes, bloodied, wounded, and refusing aid, was something else entirely. She didn't just survive chaos. She owned it. The medic finally allowed himself a moment to assess the damage properly. The shrapnel wound was deep, jagged, and bleeding heavily. Any misstep could have resulted in permanent nerve damage or worse. Yet Emily adjusted her stance without hesitation, reloaded her rifle, and signaled the remaining Marines to cover the convoy. She moved like a shadow through the smoke, assessing threats, marking targets, and occasionally giving short, calm orders to nearby soldiers. The medic followed as best he could, marveling at her precision and control. It wasn't just skill. It was discipline honed from years of deliberate preparation, pain endurance, and mental fortitude. Minutes later, the last insurgent threat was neutralized. The convoy pushed forward, dust swirling around the vehicles like a storm in miniature. Emily walked beside the medic, rifle in hand, blood soaking through her sleeve. Yet she held herself upright, shoulders squared, breathing steady. The medic finally spoke, unable to restrain his astonishment. "I've treated hundreds of Marines in worse shape than you. None of them handled it like this. What are you made of?" She looked at him briefly, eyes unflinching. "Steel and stubbornness," she said simply. Then, without waiting for a response, she turned her attention back to the convoy. Around them, the rest of the Marines moved cautiously, wary but inspired. They had seen courage, but what they had witnessed in Emily Hayes was something different. It wasn't just bravery, it was controlled mastery over chaos, pain, and fear. The medic realized that words would fail. He would never fully comprehend how a young Marine, bleeding and wounded, could move, calculate, and act as if her body and mind were perfectly synchronized machines. All he could do was follow, patch, and protect, silently acknowledging that she had already surpassed him, and perhaps anyone, in a way that defied explanation. For Emily, the firefight was over, but the lesson lingered. Pain didn't dictate action. Fear didn't control decisions. Survival wasn't about screams or panic. It was about control, discipline, and silent endurance. She had learned it long ago, and now, in the heart of combat, the truth of her training shone brighter than the desert sun. As the convoy rolled towards safer ground, dust swirling behind them like a trail of ghosts, Emily Hayes remained steadfast, bloodied but silent, wounded but unwavering. And in the minds of those who witnessed her resolve, a new benchmark for resilience had been set. No one spoke much for the next few minutes, each operator lost in their own reflection of what they had just seen. Even the SEAL medic, hardened and world-weary, remained unusually quiet, glancing at Emily with a mixture of awe, disbelief, and unspoken respect. She didn't look back, didn't boast, didn't seek acknowledgement. She simply moved forward wounded, but silent, and more formidable than anyone present could have imagined. By the time the convoy finally pulled into the forward operating base, the sun was beginning its slow descent behind the dusty horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the sand-scarred compound. The roar of engines faded into the background, replaced by the soft groans and murmurs of exhausted Marines sprawled across the dirt. Smoke drifted lazily from destroyed Humvees and small fires that had yet to be extinguished. The acrid smell of gunpowder and blood hung heavy, a stark reminder of the chaos that had erupted only hours before. Emily Hayes moved deliberately through the base gates, every step measured despite the steady drip of blood from her arm. The adrenaline that had carried her through the ambush was beginning to ebb, leaving behind a simmering ache that would have incapacitated most Marines. Not her. Her gait remained unbroken, her head high, eyes scanning the perimeter, still assessing threats even within the supposed safety of the base. The SEAL medic followed behind her, his hands full of medical supplies, glancing over his shoulder to ensure she wasn't masking any delayed injuries. He had treated dozens of combat wounds, seen Marines scream in pain and collapse under injuries far less severe than hers. Yet Emily remained upright, calm, in control, an unshakable force. He found himself almost afraid to speak, not wanting to break the rhythm she had established in the chaos of battle. "Corporal Hayes," he said softly, approaching her side once they reached a quieter section of the compound. "You've got to let me patch that properly. You've lost too much blood. You could pass out any moment." She finally allowed herself a brief glance at him. Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, met his with the calm steadiness that had unnerved him all morning. "Not yet," she said. "We need the squad checked first. Make sure everyone else is stable before worrying about me." He blinked, astonished. "Not yet? You're bleeding like a faucet." Her lips quirked into the faintest smile, almost imperceptible. "Pain is a signal, not a command," she reminded him, her tone more statement than suggestion. She didn't sound defensive. She didn't sound proud. She sounded matter of fact. The medic shook his head and took a deep breath. He had trained soldiers, rescued them, and stabilized them under the most extreme circumstances. But he had never encountered anyone like her. Someone who treated their own wound as a background noise, while still managing the battlefield with perfect awareness. Nearby Marines whispered to one another, still shaking slightly, eyes darting toward her. They had seen courage before, but Emily's composure transcended courage. She wasn't merely brave. She was in command of her own body, mind, and reactions in a way that defied everything they knew about human limits. The medic finally relented, motioning her to a makeshift aid station. Emily allowed him to guide her to a cot, but she didn't sit immediately. Instead, she crouched, keeping her rifle within reach. Only when she had scanned every corner, every potential threat, did she finally lower herself to the cot. He worked quickly, removing the makeshift bandage and inspecting the wound. Shrapnel had torn through muscle, leaving a jagged channel that required immediate attention. Any wrong move could damage nerves permanently, or leave her with lifelong impairment. He started cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic and preparing sutures. "You're calm enough to make a monk jealous," he muttered, not looking up from the wound. "Do you even feel pain?" Emily exhaled slowly, eyes still fixed on a corner of the base where a group of Marines unloaded gear. "Of course I feel it," she said quietly. "I just don't let it dictate my actions. The body screams. The mind decides." He stared at her, trying to process the statement. It sounded simple, almost philosophical, but watching her move through blood, bullets, and chaos like a machine made of calm steel, he couldn't deny its truth. As he stitched, he caught himself glancing at her again. This wasn't just toughness. This wasn't adrenaline masking fear. This was conditioning. Training drilled so deep it had become instinct. He wondered silently about her past, her upbringing. Few Marines arrived in the Corps with this level of innate resilience. Was it something her father had instilled? A special program? Whatever it was, it had created someone extraordinary. Emily finished her first round of scans of the base, moving her gaze from the wounded to the standing Marines. Some were patched up, others shaken but stable. She gave concise, calm orders to those checking vehicles and securing perimeters, never raising her voice, never seeming impatient. Even the SEAL medic found himself following her lead, amazed by the efficiency she maintained despite injury. Eventually, she allowed herself a seat. Her arm hung loosely at her side, still bleeding lightly, but her posture remained perfect, unwavering. The medic cleaned, stitched, and bandaged her wound properly, his hands steady, but his mind still racing. "You know," he said carefully, "I've treated Marines who cried before they even got a tourniquet on. But you—" He shook his head. "I don't even have words. Who taught you to endure like this?" Emily's eyes flickered with something fleeting, almost nostalgia. "Life did," she said simply. Then her gaze returned to the perimeter. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Her silence carried more weight than explanation. The medic understood. She wasn't hiding anything. She wasn't seeking praise. She was merely built differently. He watched her as she scanned the base again, calculated every angle. Her wounded arm was silent testament to her training, discipline, and sheer mental fortitude. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower, painting the desert sand in shades of crimson and gold. Emily stayed alert, refusing morphine, refusing rest beyond the minimal required to prevent shock. The rest of the squad took turns checking in on her, offering water, food, and support. She accepted none of it freely, allowing only what was necessary. Her focus never wavered. As evening fell, a faint quiet settled over the base. The firefight was behind them, yet tension lingered in the air. Every Marine felt it, the weight of survival, the awareness that tomorrow could bring another ambush, another hailstorm of bullets. And yet, Emily remained calm, a fixed point amid uncertainty. Her body, though wounded, moved with purpose. Her mind, though tested, remained razor-sharp. Finally, the medic allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had seen operators endure unimaginable pain, face death countless times, and survive. But Emily Hayes, wounded, silent, and unshakable, was something new entirely. She wasn't performing heroics for recognition. She wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't even proving anything. She was simply executing the logic of survival, refined to perfection. By the time the sun disappeared behind the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of blood red and amber, Emily allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible sigh. She had survived. The convoy had survived. The Marines had survived. And through it all, she had remained herself wounded, silent, and impossibly resilient. The SEAL medic watched her, exhausted yet alert, and realized that he had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not courage, not bravery, but mastery over the self. And in that moment, he understood why the Marines whispered her name even now. Long after the firefight ended, Emily Hayes was not merely a soldier. She was a standard against which all others would be measured, whether they knew it or not. The night air settled in, cool against their sweat and blood. Emily sat, quietly scanning the stars, letting the tension of the day ebb just enough to survive the night. But even in rest, her presence was commanding. The squad moved differently around her now, their movements more deliberate, their attention sharper, inspired by a Marine who had endured chaos, injury, and pain without a single cry. She had already become legend. The night settled over the forward operating base like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Dust lingered in the air, thick with the smell of burnt rubber, gunpowder, and blood. Fires still smoldered near the perimeter, where the convoy had taken cover, casting flickering shadows that danced across the soldiers' faces. The day's chaos had left everyone on edge, nerves frayed and muscles tight. Even the most seasoned Marines moved with a caution born of survival instinct, glancing over shoulders and checking angles. Emily Hayes stood apart from the rest, leaning against a reinforced wall near the mess tent. Her arm was properly bandaged, but the stain of dried blood ran faintly along the sleeve of her uniform. She didn't eat, didn't talk much, didn't make a move beyond scanning the compound. Her presence was quiet, but commanding a tension in the air that demanded attention without a single raised voice. The SEAL medic approached cautiously. "Emily," he said softly, still marveling at her composure, "I've been around combat operations for years, and I've never seen someone handle wounds and chaos like you. Most Marines wouldn't last 5 minutes under fire, let alone move and fight like this. Where did you learn to do that?" Emily's eyes shifted to him, steady and unblinking. "Life taught me," she said simply. Her voice was low, calm, almost matter-of-fact. "Pain is a signal. It's not a command. The body screams, but the mind decides." He stared, shaking his head in disbelief. That's more than just training. That's something else entirely. That's survival on another level." Emily didn't reply. She scanned the shadows near the perimeter, then shifted her gaze to the squad gathered nearby, many still tending to minor injuries, checking weapons, or quietly talking about the firefight. The SEAL medic followed her eyes. He had seen many capable Marines, operators trained in elite programs, but none had the calm, measured control she displayed. She wasn't merely executing orders. She was controlling the battlefield around her, even after the immediate threat had passed. Inside the mess tent, the SEAL captain called for a debrief. Operators filtered in, sitting on folding chairs and crates, some nursing minor scrapes, others still trembling from adrenaline. Emily followed, her posture upright, expression unreadable. Even when seated, she radiated alertness. Eyes that should have been weary remained sharp, scanning, evaluating. "Let's review the ambush," the captain began. "RPGs from the north, small arms fire from both flanks. Some of our vehicles were hit, but casualties were minimal considering the circumstances. Everyone, report in." One by one, Marines recounted what happened. The room was tense, filled with the echoes of bullets, shouted commands, and dust-choked breaths from memory. When it was Emily's turn, she spoke with precision. "Enemy positioned behind the east wall," she began. "Two insurgents moving south flank. Vehicle 1 suppressed left approach. Medics cleared priority wounds. Coverage maintained on north exit. All sectors cleared by 0700. No hesitation. No embellishment. Just facts." Every Marine and operator in the room turned toward her, stunned by the clarity and authority in her words. The SEAL captain's brow furrowed. He had seen battlefield reports, debriefs, and operators with tactical experience. But there was something different about the way Emily spoke, calm, yet commanding, clear yet unshakable, precise yet unemotional. One of the Marines whispered to another, barely audible, "Who even trains like that?" Emily caught none of it. Her focus remained fixed on the mission's facts, her mental checklist unbroken. The SEAL medic, however, felt a chill of recognition. He had seen the same kind of discipline before, not in a classroom or a standard military program, but in someone conditioned long before they ever wore a uniform. Someone forged in silence, hardship, and relentless preparation. After the debrief, operators were dismissed to rest or tending tasks, but Emily stayed seated, quietly observing, never lowering her guard. The medic approached her again, sitting on the crate beside her. "You know, most people would have crumpled after a wound like that. You've endured more in one firefight than most see in years. How do you do it?" She shifted slightly, letting the bloodied bandage on her arm settle comfortably. "Control," she said. "Discipline. Awareness. Pain is only part of the equation. The rest is making choices despite it." The medic exhaled, leaning back. "I've treated hundreds of Marines," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and none have done what you just did today." She didn't respond. Eyes moving to a corner where two Marines were arguing over a vehicle inspection. She offered a simple nod toward them, silently directing the outcome. Even wounded, she exerted authority through presence alone. The medic watched, marveling, realizing that the effect she had on those around her was as important as her physical endurance. Later that evening, as the base settled into the uneasy rhythms of a desert night, whispers about her past began to circulate quietly among the squad. Some speculated about ranger training or classified survival courses. Others guessed martial arts masters or special programs no one outside the elite had ever heard of. Emily never confirmed a thing. She didn't need to. Her silence was more commanding than any explanation could be. The medic finally asked, almost hesitantly, "Do you ever let anyone see what it takes to endure like this?" Her eyes met his briefly, steady and unwavering. "Why would I?" she said. "Pain is personal. Fear is personal. What I endure is my responsibility. Others only need to learn from the result." The medic nodded slowly. There was no point arguing. He had watched history unfold before his eyes in the battlefield, but Emily Hayes wasn't just making history. She was redefining it. Her actions had created a new standard for resilience, and those who had witnessed her composure understood instinctively that she wasn't just strong. She was untouchable by ordinary expectations of human limits. Hours passed. Emily finally allowed herself a small stretch, quietly moving to inspect her weapon and gear. Every motion was deliberate, calm, and precise. Even in the darkness, she projected control. Other Marines, still restless and wary, couldn't help but notice, unconsciously modeling their own posture and awareness after hers. The SEAL medic remained nearby, watching, reflecting. This wasn't ordinary toughness. It wasn't even elite training. It was something deeper, something almost philosophical. Her body had been conditioned to endure. Her mind had been conditioned to control. Her spirit, unyielding. He realized that, unlike many others, she did not need to prove herself. Her actions were proof enough. Later, the base quieted. Most operators slept, huddled in tents or sleeping bags, dreams haunted by gunfire and dust. But Emily remained alert, scanning the perimeter, eyes sharp, mind alert. Wounded but silent, she had survived not only the firefight, but the scrutiny of everyone who had doubted her strength. She had endured the pain without flinching, commanded respect without speaking loudly, and inspired awe without a word. The night deepened, and the desert air grew cold. Emily finally allowed herself to lean back slightly, acknowledging the stillness for a brief moment. The SEAL medic, sitting nearby, finally dared to speak again. "You know, I've treated countless Marines who were screaming, panicked, and terrified in similar situations. But you didn't even seem human. You were something else entirely." She looked at him, expression neutral, yet her presence communicated understanding. Humanity isn't about reacting to pain. It's about moving through it. The words lingered in the air, heavier than any bullet or shrapnel. Even in darkness, even in silence, Emily Hayes had already left her mark on the squad. They would remember her composure, her precision, her unwavering control, not as a legend told in stories, but as a living example of what it meant to endure, survive, and command without ever raising a voice. As the first hints of dawn crept across the horizon, painting the sand in soft amber and pink, Emily finally allowed herself to rest, if only for a few moments. Her mind remained alert, her body tense, but the quiet of the base provided a brief reprieve. She had survived another day. She had controlled another battle. And she had silently taught everyone around her the true meaning of resilience. In that desert dawn, wounded but unbroken, Emily Hayes became more than a Marine. She became a standard, a symbol. And even the SEAL medic, who had seen the extremes of human endurance, could not look at her without awe. The sun had barely risen when the alarm sounded, cutting through the quiet of the forward operating base like a jagged blade. The hum of distant engines mingled with the clamor of shouting Marines, radios crackling with urgent reports. Emily Hayes was already on her feet, bloodied arm bandaged, but moving with an unbroken, precise rhythm. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. The lull of last night's firefight was over. Danger was real again, and instinct had taken over. "Incoming intel," the SEAL captain barked, pointing at a map illuminated by a dim lantern in the command tent. "Insurgents spotted near the southern ridge. Reports of weapons caches and a possible sniper nest. We move out in 10. Emily didn't need to hear the rest. Her mind immediately processed the tactical possibilities, the angles of fire, and the cover available. She checked her rifle, adjusted her gear, and moved toward the staging area. Each motion was deliberate, efficient, a series of small, precise adjustments that betrayed not just experience, but extraordinary conditioning. The medic followed her, a mix of admiration and unease, weighing heavy in his chest. Her calm was unsettling. It wasn't just bravery. It wasn't just skill. It was control pure, calculated control in a world built on chaos. By the time the team reached the ridge, the wind had picked up, carrying the dry scent of sand and tension. Emily dropped to a low crouch, scanning the terrain, silently calculating lines of sight and potential threats. She adjusted her bandaged arm slightly, tested her weapon, and began directing cover fire as the team advanced. Movement flickered in the distant shapes darting between the rocks. 2 insurgents, armed and moving fast, clearly trying to flank the squad. Emily raised her rifle, aimed without hesitation, and squeezed the trigger. 2 precise rounds struck true. A 3rd insurgent dove behind cover, attempting to escape. The SEAL medic caught his breath. He had just witnessed her hit 2 targets in seconds, all while wounded, bleeding, and never once faltering. Most soldiers would have crumpled. Most operators would have panicked. Not Emily. Her calm had become tactical advantage. Flank left. She called softly, voice steady, directing a Marine without looking directly at him. The Marine froze, then executed her instructions perfectly. Emily's influence was quiet, but absolute. Her presence commanded precision, even under fire. The insurgents returned fire, bullets whipping past, striking the dirt around the squad with sharp pings. Emily didn't flinch. She rolled slightly, adjusting her stance, and fired again. Another insurgent fell. She moved fluidly, almost like water flowing through rocks, her body ignoring pain, her mind functioning with terrifying clarity. The medic finally reached her side, checking the bandage on her arm. "You're losing too much blood," he shouted over the gunfire. "You need evacuation." Emily shook her head slightly. "Not now. Cover the perimeter first." Her voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was an unshakable authority in it that made him hesitate. Minutes stretched into a blur. The firefight continued, insurgents attempting to regroup, bullets ricocheting across rocks and sand. Emily's movements were flawless, each shot precise, each maneuver deliberate. Even as fatigue should have begun to sap her strength, she remained steady, scanning, directing, and shooting with an almost inhuman composure. The SEAL captain, observing from a slightly elevated position, couldn't hide his disbelief. "Who is she?" he muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on Emily as she moved through the chaos. The man had seen countless operators in combat, yet here was a Marine commanding attention, not with shouting or posturing, but with absolute mastery of self and battlefield. As the team advanced, a grenade landed nearby. Instinctively, Emily dove, covering her wounded arm, rolling behind cover, then immediately returning fire, neutralizing 2 insurgents attempting to capitalize on the chaos. The medic moved to her side, hands shaking, ready to drag her to safety, but she waved him off. "Stay. Focus," she said, eyes unblinking, scanning the ridge. Her refusal to panic was contagious. The squad tightened formation, following her lead. Where most would have scattered, her control provided cohesion. Where most would have faltered, her calm dictated precision. Eventually, the insurgents began retreating, their morale broken by the squad's effectiveness and Emily's unwavering composure. The firefight ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the ridge littered with spent casings and smoldering rocks. Emily lowered her rifle slowly, still scanning for potential threats, still calculating, still composed. The SEAL medic finally allowed himself to breathe. He looked at her, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're? I don't even know what to call it. How do you do this?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She scanned the ridge one last time, ensuring no hidden enemies remained. "Control," she said finally. "Discipline. Awareness. Pain is only part of the equation." Her words were quiet but resonated far louder than the gunfire had moments before. The squad gathered around, still breathing heavily, still adjusting to the adrenaline of the fight. Even the SEAL captain approached, a mixture of respect and incredulity in his expression. "You didn't even hesitate once," he said. "Most people would have panicked under fire, especially after taking a wound like that. How are you?" "Like this?" Emily shrugged lightly, a gesture so casual it was almost imperceptible. "I've trained to endure. I've trained to control. The rest is survival." The medic knew then that no amount of questions would unravel her past. Whatever had forged her into this force of nature had happened long before she ever set foot in uniform. He realized that day, and every day after, that Emily Hayes was not just a Marine. She was a standard against which all others would be measured. The squad moved back toward the base, securing the ridge and collecting intelligence from the skirmish. Emily walked steadily, one hand lightly pressing her bandage to keep it from slipping. Blood still seeped through the fabric, but she ignored it. Her mind was already calculating, anticipating, planning. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the squad had returned, carrying the spoils of the engagement, confiscated weapons, maps, and intelligence on insurgent positions. Emily's presence, though quiet, had transformed the team. They moved with more precision, more confidence, inspired by her example. Where fear could have dominated, her control imposed order. As they reached the base, whispers followed her. "Did you see her arm? She didn't even flinch. She's incredible. Who even trains like that?" "I don't think she's human." Emily said nothing. She never needed to. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. Her silence, her composure, and her resilience had left the squad in awe, cementing her growing legend among the operators. The SEAL medic watched from behind, marveling at her endurance and focus. Most soldiers, even elite operators, would have broken long before now. Yet Emily Hayes, wounded and bleeding, had not only survived but excelled, demonstrating mastery over herself and the battlefield in a way that defied belief. That night, as the base settled into the uneasy rhythm of desert darkness, Emily finally allowed herself a brief moment to rest. Her rifle lay within arm's reach, her eyes scanning the horizon, still alert. The squad, inspired and humbled, moved quietly around her, acutely aware that she had redefined resilience. Wounded but silent, Emily Hayes had endured another firefight, teaching everyone around her that strength was not measured in screams or aggression, but in control, composure, and unyielding resolve. She had survived not just physically, but mentally, leaving the SEALs and Marines in stunned admiration. By the time she finally lowered her head for a moment, the desert stars shone overhead, distant and unblinking. She had once again proven that pain, fear, and chaos were only signals, and her mind, her will, would always decide the outcome. The base had settled into a tense rhythm by mid-morning. The previous day's firefight lingered in every corner, the smell of gunpowder, burnt metal, and blood still clinging to uniforms. Even the seasoned SEALs and Marines moved with an edge, nerves taut, scanning the horizon as if the desert could erupt at any second. And yet, in the midst of this quiet unease, Emily Hayes remained a pillar of calm. Her arm was still bandaged, the faint seep of dry blood marking the fabric, but she moved deliberately through the compound as if every action were choreographed. She checked weapons, reassessed perimeters, and ensured that defensive positions were reinforced. The squad followed her lead, not out of obligation, but because her presence demanded attention. Her calm dictated cohesion. The SEAL medic observed her silently. He had been at her side through 2 firefights now, seen her endure injuries that would cripple most operators. And yet she moved like a ghost of control. He could not help but wonder about her past, who had forged this level of discipline into a young Marine, capable of suppressing pain and fear with such mechanical precision. Rumors began to circulate among the squad. Quietly, in whispered conversations over gear checks or shared rations, operators speculated about her origins. "She's passed through some Ranger program, right?" One muttered, "No, it's too precise. Must be some special ops training before the course," another replied. A few swore she had survived something childhood hardships or survivalist extremes that had conditioned her to endure beyond normal limits. Emily never confirmed or denied a word. Her silence became part of her aura. The SEALs noticed it. The other Marines noticed it. Even the SEAL captain, seasoned and stoic, felt a mix of respect and discomfort around her. She didn't boast, she didn't brag, and she didn't need to explain herself. She simply existed, wounded yet commanding, and everyone adjusted accordingly. Later that morning, the medic approached her while she checked a map of potential insurgent movements. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "I've treated operators who faced worse wounds than yours, and they broke. You never even flinch. I can't figure it out. Who trained you to do this?" Emily's eyes flicked up, calm and unblinking. "Life," she said simply, returning her gaze to the map. Her voice was soft, yet carried a weight that silenced him. "Pain is part of the journey, not the destination. You endure it, control it, and then move forward. The rest is a distraction." The medic exhaled slowly. He had trained for resilience, taught Marines how to manage trauma, but he had never seen such mastery. He realized she didn't just endure. She had internalized discipline to the point that pain was no longer a limiter. It was simply data. As the squad prepared for another patrol to scout the southern ridge, Emily moved among them, checking equipment and issuing concise, calm instructions. She rarely raised her voice, yet each command was executed flawlessly. Her presence had become the glue holding the team together. Her discipline was contagious. Marines who had been anxious or hesitant now followed her lead without question. The SEAL captain approached her, curiosity mixed with awe. "I've seen operators excel under fire, but you redefine it. You never hesitate, never panic. How do you maintain control when everything around you is chaos?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She adjusted her bandaged arm, glancing toward the horizon where the ridge loomed like a silent threat. "Control," she said finally. "Discipline, awareness. Pain is only a signal, not a command. You don't let it dictate your actions. You let it inform them. That's all." Her words resonated in the quiet compound, heavy with authority. The captain's eyes narrowed slightly in thought. He had never encountered a soldier whose silence commanded respect so thoroughly. Most operators relied on posturing or experience. Emily relied on control itself, unspoken and absolute. The squad moved out toward the ridge, Emily leading the way. Every step was measured, precise. Even in her wounded state, she maintained a cadence that set the pace for the team. Operators instinctively mirrored her movements, subconsciously absorbing the discipline she radiated. Every glance she cast, every adjustment she made to her weapon or stance, was a lesson in composure under fire. As they neared the southern ridge, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of desert dust and potential threats. Emily paused, scanning the terrain carefully. She motioned for the squad to spread, assessing angles of potential insurgent activity. The medic followed, still astounded at her calm under threat. "Everyone watch your sectors," she said, voice low but authoritative. "Cover fire ready. Move slowly. Eyes sharp." Insurgents appeared small, shadowed figures moving quickly along the ridge. Emily raised her rifle, squeezing off precise bursts. 2 fell immediately. The rest scattered. She moved fluidly from cover to cover, directing her team silently, adjusting their fire and positioning without ever raising her voice. The SEAL medic watched, hands trembling slightly, as she neutralized threats with the efficiency of a seasoned operator, all while her wound bled faintly, ignored. "How is she like this?" he muttered under his breath, glancing at the SEAL captain. The man simply shook his head, equally awestruck. When the threat subsided, Emily lowered her rifle, scanning the horizon for additional danger. She moved with quiet authority, ensuring the ridge was secure before allowing herself to take a brief pause. Even in rest, her body remained alert, her mind calculating, her presence commanding. Back at the base later that evening, whispers about her past intensified. Operators speculated endlessly, some convinced she had survived extreme hardship as a child, others certain she had undergone secret, elite training programs before enlisting. Emily never confirmed a single rumor. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than any explanation ever could. The SEAL medic approached once more, sitting across from her as she cleaned her weapon. "You know, I've treated countless Marines in worse shape than you. None of them handled it like this. None. You're remarkable. Not just your skill, but your control. How do you stay like this?" Emily looked at him, eyes unflinching. "Discipline," she said softly. "Awareness, acceptance. Pain is a tool, not a master. You don't fight it. You use it to sharpen focus. That's how I survive. That's how I lead." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The medic understood finally that Emily Hayes wasn't simply a Marine. She was a benchmark, a standard of resilience that others would be measured against for the rest of their careers. As night fell, the base quieted, stars twinkling faintly above the desert horizon. Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection, sitting alone, weapon ready, eyes scanning the dark landscape. She had endured, led, and commanded without complaint or recognition. Wounded but silent, she had taught everyone around her an unspoken lesson. Strength is not measured in screams or bravado, but in calm, controlled action in the face of chaos. The SEAL medic watched from a distance, awe in his chest. Emily Hayes had survived not just physically, but mentally, reshaping the perception of resilience for every operator who witnessed her. She had become more than a Marine. She had become a legend, silent but unforgettable. Dawn had barely broken over the desert when the new mission briefing began. The insurgent threat on the southern ridge had escalated overnight. Intelligence indicated a heavily armed cell was fortifying a small compound, just beyond the reach of drone surveillance. The SEAL captain outlined the plan: a swift insertion, neutralization of hostiles, and exfil under heavy fire. Every operator listened intently. Every operator except one, whose calm presence seemed almost unnatural amidst the tension. Emily Hayes stood silently at the edge of the tent, arms crossed over her bandaged sleeve, eyes scanning the dusty horizon. Her rifle was clean, her gear checked with methodical precision. She had taken only moments to rest after the previous firefight, yet she moved with the energy and awareness of someone unburdened by fatigue. Every operator felt the magnetism of her composure. It was infectious. "Coordinates locked," the SEAL captain said. "We move in 20. Be ready for heavy resistance. Expect RPGs, ambushes, and multiple hostiles." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply nodded and moved to the front of the formation, her bandaged arm pressed lightly to keep it stable. A medic followed close behind, anxiety etched on his face. He knew the dangers. The compound was heavily fortified, and Emily was still nursing a wound from 2 previous firefights. The convoy rolled out, engines rumbling low over the sand, dust rising in clouds around the armored vehicles. Emily sat rigidly, scanning every shadow, every rise, every crease in the barren terrain. Her mind was calculating angles of approach, potential ambush points, and escape routes. She didn't speak her thoughts. She didn't need to. The squad could sense her awareness, moving with a cohesion that had been impossible the day before. As the convoy approached the compound, a sudden burst of gunfire erupted from a concealed position along the ridge. Insurgents had anticipated the approach. The first Humvee rocked violently as an RPG struck the front, sending shrapnel and dust flying in every direction. Marines screamed, ducking for cover, and the air filled with the sharp scent of burning metal and gunpowder. Emily didn't hesitate. She rolled out of cover, rifle raised, scanning for threats. Bullets ricocheted around her, stinging her shoulder, but she ignored the pain. Every motion was precise, fluid, and controlled. She fired at insurgents attempting to flank the team, neutralizing two before they could react. The medic shouted, "Hayes! You need to move." She shook her head slightly, voice calm over the roar of gunfire. Cover fire first. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours as Emily advanced across the rocky terrain, leading the team with silent authority. Her shots were precise, her movements unerringly efficient. Even the SEALs, hardened operators with years of combat experience, followed her lead instinctively, entranced by the clarity and control she projected. A grenade landed near the convoy, exploding with a violent roar. Emily dove behind cover instinctively, pressing her bandaged arm to her side, then rolled to engage insurgents trying to exploit the chaos. Two more fell under her unerring aim. She moved like water over stone, graceful, efficient, lethal. The compound was finally in sight. Emily paused for a split second, scanning the structure for threats and entry points. She signaled the team to spread, silent gestures that conveyed far more than words ever could. Each operator responded immediately, instinctively following the rhythm she had established. Inside the compound, insurgents had taken positions in elevated areas, firing down with automatic weapons. Emily adjusted her angle, firing in short, controlled bursts. Each shot was calculated, neutralizing threats without wasting ammunition. She moved from cover to cover, keeping the squad coordinated, ensuring no one was exposed unnecessarily. The SEAL medic, running alongside her, checked her bandaged arm. Blood seeped faintly through the fabric, but she ignored it. "You're pushing too hard," he shouted. "Evac now, or you'll—" "Not yet," she replied, eyes locked on the next window. "Secure first, evacuate second." Minutes later, the last insurgent was neutralized. The team secured the compound, collecting intelligence and clearing weapons caches. Emily moved methodically, inspecting each room, checking corners, ensuring no threat remained. Even wounded, she maintained complete control, operating with a level of precision that left the SEALs and Marines in awe. When the firefight ended, the team regrouped outside the compound. Emily lowered her rifle slowly, scanning the horizon for additional threats. Her bandaged arm hung at her side, blood still visible, but her composure remained unbroken. The SEAL captain approached cautiously, awe written across his face. "Corporal Hayes. That was remarkable. I've never seen anyone operate under fire like that, let alone with a wound. You're incredible." Emily didn't boast. She simply nodded, allowing the words to settle without response. Her actions spoke louder than any praise could. The medic finally exhaled, shaking his head. "I've treated hundreds of Marines in worse shape than this. None of them handled it like you. None. How do you do it?" Emily looked at him calmly. "Discipline. Awareness. Pain is only data. You don't fight it. You use it. That's how you survive, how you lead, how you endure." The SEAL captain watched silently. He had encountered elite operators before, men and women who had survived the most extreme circumstances. But Emily Hayes was different. Her resilience, control, and precision were beyond training. They were instinct, discipline, and philosophy combined into action. As the team returned to the base, the desert wind carrying dust and echoes of gunfire, whispers followed Emily. "Did you see her arm?" One Marine muttered. "She didn't even flinch." "I don't think she's human," another replied. Emily ignored the whispers. She didn't need recognition. Her silence, her composure, and her unwavering resilience had already spoken volumes. She had survived another mission, led her team flawlessly, and taught everyone around her the meaning of true endurance without ever raising her voice. That night, as the base settled into quiet vigilance, Emily finally allowed herself to rest. The stars above the desert shone distant and cold, yet she remained alert, weapon ready, scanning the horizon. She had faced chaos, pain, and death, and emerged not just alive, but in control. Wounded but silent, Emily Hayes had cemented her legendary status among the SEALs and Marines. She had endured, led, and inspired, proving that true strength lies not in screams, posturing, or bravado, but in calm, controlled action under the most extreme circumstances. And as she finally lowered her head for a fleeting moment of rest, one truth was clear. Emily Hayes was more than a Marine. She was a standard, a symbol, and a living testament to the power of discipline, awareness, and unyielding resolve. The desert sun had barely risen when the alarm echoed through the base. Intelligence had confirmed a larger insurgent force had regrouped farther south, fortified in a narrow canyon that served as a choke point for patrols. The SEAL captain called for a high-risk operation, neutralize the threat before they could launch a coordinated strike on the base. Every operator understood the danger. Every operator except one, whose presence radiated calm authority in the midst of chaos. Emily Hayes tightened her bandaged sleeve, checking her rifle with meticulous care. Her movements were deliberate, fluid, and precise, betraying no hint of fatigue or pain. She had endured 2 firefights in the last 48 hours, her body marked with bruises, blood, and exhaustion, but her mind remained unbroken, razor-sharp, and ready for action. "Team, this canyon is a trap," the SEAL captain briefed. "They have elevation advantage, sniper positions, and multiple choke points. Entry must be silent and coordinated. Expect ambushes at every turn." Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the map and the terrain outside the tent, already calculating angles, cover, escape routes, and sniper lines. Her silence was magnetic, a signal to the team that the operation demanded focus above all else. The convoy rolled toward the canyon, dust rising in clouds, engines humming low. Emily moved in the lead vehicle, scanning every ridge, every shadow, every crevice. Her posture radiated vigilance and control. Even wounded, she projected an unspoken authority that the entire squad instinctively mirrored. As they entered the canyon, insurgent fire erupted from above. Automatic weapons raked the convoy, and an RPG struck a vehicle, sending a plume of fire and debris into the air. Marines ducked, shields were raised, and chaos threatened to overwhelm the squad, but Emily remained a pillar of calm. She rolled from cover, rifle ready, advancing methodically. Bullets ricocheted around her, some grazing her shoulder, but she ignored the pain. Each motion was precise, each shot deliberate. She neutralized insurgents attempting to flank, covering the squad's advance while maintaining awareness of multiple angles of attack. The SEAL medic ran alongside, shouting, "Hayes, you're losing blood fast. We need extraction." "Not yet," she replied, voice low but unwavering. "Cover fire first." Time dilated. The firefight raged, echoing off the canyon walls, dust and smoke obscuring vision. Emily moved like a phantom, advancing from rock to rock, positioning herself to protect the squad while eliminating threats. Each shot was calculated, each movement rehearsed in instinctive precision. One insurgent tried to climb above her, hoping to gain height advantage. Emily spun, firing twice, and the man collapsed silently. Another emerged from cover, firing rapidly. Emily dove behind a boulder, rolled, and returned fire, neutralizing the threat without hesitation. The squad, inspired by her composure, followed her lead with flawless execution. Where fear could have dominated, Emily's control imposed cohesion. Where chaos could have disrupted operations, her presence dictated order. Hours passed, or what felt like hours in the heat and dust of the canyon. Emily's arm throbbed with pain. Blood seeped through her bandage. Her body screamed exhaustion, but her mind remained unshaken. She continued to move methodically, directing, neutralizing threats, and protecting the squad. Finally, they reached the insurgent command post within the canyon. Emily led the approach, scanning every entrance, every window, every potential sniper position. With silent signals, the squad moved in, clearing rooms efficiently. The insurgents were caught off guard by the speed and precision of the assault. Inside the command post, Emily encountered the last remaining threat, a heavily armed insurgent attempting to trigger an explosive device. Without hesitation, she tackled him to the ground, disarming the bomb with methodical precision. Every movement was calculated, every second deliberate. The SEAL medic approached, breathing heavily. "I can't believe what I just saw," he muttered. You handled that like it was nothing." Emily stood, brushing herself off, eyes scanning the area. Blood from her previous wounds marked her uniform, but she remained composed, alert, and unwavering. "Nothing is nothing," she said quietly. "Everything is data. Respond accordingly." The squad regrouped outside the canyon, carrying intelligence, weapons, and captured insurgents. They moved with a sense of awe and reverence, inspired by the unbroken composure of the Marine who had led them through hell twice in as many days. Back at the base, whispers about Emily's feats reached every corner. "Did you see her tackle that insurgent and disarm the bomb?" One Marine whispered. "She didn't even flinch. I swear she's not human," another replied. "How is anyone that calm and precise under fire?" Emily ignored the whispers. She didn't need recognition. Her actions had already spoken volumes. She had faced extreme danger, survived wounds that would cripple most operators, and emerged not just unbroken, but commanding and precise. The SEAL medic approached, sitting beside her as she cleaned her rifle. "I've treated hundreds of Marines, seen elite operators in combat, and I've never witnessed anything like this." "How do you do it?" Emily looked at him, calm and steady. "Discipline," she said softly. "Awareness, acceptance. Pain is only a signal. You don't fight it. You use it. That's how you survive, how you lead, how you endure." The medic nodded slowly, finally understanding. Emily Hayes was not just a Marine. She was a standard, a living benchmark of resilience, composure, and unyielding resolve. She had endured chaos, injury, and fear, and transformed it into mastery over herself and the battlefield. Night fell over the desert once more, stars twinkling faintly above the base. Emily finally allowed herself a moment of rest, weapon within reach, eyes scanning the horizon. She had survived, led, and inspired twice in one day, and solidified her place as a legend among the SEALs and Marines. Wounded but silent, Emily Hayes had proven that true strength was not measured in screams, aggression, or bravado. It was measured in control, composure, and precise action under extreme circumstances. She had endured, led, and protected, leaving an unspoken legacy that would inspire every operator who witnessed her in action. The SEAL captain approached her one last time, nodding in solemn respect. "You've redefined what it means to be a Marine," he said quietly. Emily didn't respond. She simply checked her weapon, adjusted her bandage, and gazed at the desert horizon. Her presence alone spoke volumes. She had survived the impossible, and in doing so, had become a standard against which all others would be measured. As the desert winds swept across the base, carrying the echoes of battle and the scent of blood and sand, Emily Hayes remained unbroken, silent, and unstoppable, a legend born not from glory, but from discipline, endurance, and unwavering resolve. And in the hearts of those who had witnessed her feats, one truth remained. Emily Hayes was more than a Marine. She was a symbol, a standard, a living testament to the power of silent strength, calculated action, and absolute control under fire. The desert night embraced her, calm and eternal, as Emily Hayes prepared for the challenges yet to come, wounded but silent, unyielding, and unforgettable.